Well, welcome everyone to the Gold Coast Open, which is also doubling as the Australian Championship. Some of you may have heard my intro previously, but it's certainly one of the strongest Gold Coast Opens, probably comparable only to 2018, which had a number of overseas guests. That's not really very likely in these COVID times. Our top three seeds are very much the favourites. They are Timur Kubakarov, the Australian champion defending his title. What I did mention before, the Australian Championship title has been awarded to this tournament because the Australian Chess Federation, as it has done since January 2020, has decided not to organise any tournaments. And so there's been no Australian Championship, no Australian Open, no Australian Junior Championships. That may change at the end of the year, but for the moment they've decided to make the Gold Coast Open into the Australian Championship. Announcing that so late, of course, has kept a lot of people who might have played unable to play. Simply, you have to plan your holidays. This is not school holidays for many states. It is for Queensland. Well, it will be tomorrow anyway. And so it's very difficult for a lot of people to come, whereas the Australian Championship is normally held in the summer holidays in January, and that enables anyone who wants to play in it. So it's a very maybe not a Mickey Mouse title, fortunately, because of the top three seeds, but certainly it's much softer, and as a result, well, in addition, perhaps the prize money is much, much lower than it has been for the Australian Championship, and yet it's a record for the Gold Coast Open. So it's $2,000 first, $1,500 second, and $500 for third place, going all the way down to eighth. So our top three seeds are our hot favourites: Timur Kubakarov, defending champion; Bobby Cheng and Xiaosong Wan. They were the players who tied for first the last time the Gold Coast Open was held, and that is all the way back in 2019, the 2021 event being cancelled at the last minute. So let's have a look at the results from round one. So we'll have a look at pairings. The next round, by the way, will start at 10 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. But the pairings for round two are not yet up, although I believe they have been published on a site called Chess Chat. So don't go to the official site, go to Chess Chat if you want to know what's going on in this championship. So on well, they don't even have the results of these pairings, but I can tell you that there were almost no upsets in the first round of the tournament. The big surprises were on board 7 and 8. Peter Froelich, the German international master who's been living in Australia for 2 decades, he went down to one of Queensland's and a player like Brady McClummett, who simply seems to outperform in Queensland, Aidan Brady, and the big surprise on board 8, where Mars Chi beat Stephen Solomon. So Mars Chi, by the way, is living in Australia. He has in fact founded the Mars Chess Club in Queensland, but is certainly not Stephen Solomon's class. His international rating is only in the 1700s. In fact, in a normal Australian Championship, around about a third of the field would not have qualified to play. Perhaps even slightly more, but because it's a Gold Coast Open and not the Championship, all sorts of people have entered. Remembering, of course, that this is a huge tournament with 2 further groups. So there is a major tournament and a minor tournament, both which will have bigger entries than the 57 players in the Championship. And they are for players with a rating limit. So if you're a very low rated player, you play the minor. If you're a middle ranking club player, you play the major. We have a few juniors who are really testing themselves in this championship. Zarui Singh, I think because of School has taken 2 byes in the first 2 rounds. He is just 12 years old. We have another 12-year-old in Jaden Oy, and he went down in the first round. And we've got some up from Melbourne, in particular Jackie Lee, the 15-year-old. And he's one to watch out for. He won his first round game. Anyway, since this is a highlights package, I guess I should show you a few of the games that happened last night. Remembering that the schedule of this event is that there was a round on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. Then the rounds are at 10 in the morning and at 3:30 in the afternoon. And that continues until the final day. Round 8 and 9 move an hour earlier. So there's a 9 o'clock in the morning start for round 8 and a 2:30 in the afternoon start for round 9. I'll be doing roundup commentary today for rounds 1, 2, and 3. This one, and then the next roundups will start at 14:30 and 20 o'clock. So, I just heard actually Zarui Singh is ill. It's not school, so that doesn't augur well. Nowadays, you do tend to get a lot of withdrawals from tournaments due to illness, and unfortunately, Zarui is down with something. He was healthy on Wednesday, so I'm not sure what it is. By the way, the tournament is being played at the Mermaid Waters Hotel on the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is in Queensland, Australia. It's just south of Brisbane, and Mermaid Waters is one of the suburbs that neighbour the beach, of course. So the players who are staying at the Mermaid Waters Hotel should have a good time. It's the middle of winter in the Gold Coast, unfortunately, so temperatures will be only, I believe, 23 degrees today. For Americans, that's 75 degrees, so that's a bit unfortunate. But some people are willing to go swimming in those sort of temperatures, so we'll see how that goes. So let's go to Chessbase and check out the some of the games. The one that really struck me was the loss by Peter Froelich and to Aidan Brady. Now, Peter Froelich is, of course, getting on a bit. He's now 49 years old. He hasn't played a lot. Back in 2006, when he moved to Queensland from Melbourne, he was quite dominant. He won the Queensland Open back then, but there hasn't been too many big results. Earlier he won the Victorian Open when he was in Melbourne, so he really was playing a bit, but he started coaching, and I don't know. Should I take? I won't take you through the whole game though. I'll take you through the early part. That went rather quickly. Sorry about that. So we have what could be in English, could be a Grunfeld, could be anything. C5, D4, and now D5, which is a little bit unusual, but not bad. Knight D6 is a main line, and after Knight C3, Knight C6 leads to a proper King's Indian. Taking on D4 and Knight C6 is playable, and D5 takes. Well, there's no easy way to get an advantage here with White, but you can certainly try swapping queens and playing Knight E5 if you want. Okay, Queen C2, Queen D5 is the point of this system. So you're not only protecting C4, but you're attacking C5, so White doesn't have time to make a discovery by moving that knight away, or Rook D1. So Knight A3 played, and Froelich just wants to get the pawn back. And here a remarkable decision by Brady. He decides not to go into any sort of ending. If he swaps the queens and plays Knight C6, then Knight Fe5 is very slightly better for White. So he keeps queens on the board. It looks to me as if that queen is going to get hit by Knight C4, and Queen H4 sets that up. Knight C6, Knight C4, Queen A6. And here a rather risky move. Very, very risky. B3. Not necessary because the knight wasn't under attack. but after knight h5, white suddenly has some problems. Now, one question is whether you can or should play rook b1 and just give away the a pawn. But Froelich goes for something extremely complicated with g4, giving away the exchange. And if bishop takes, he wants to take the knight and then drop his bishop in on h6 and then knight g5 and stuff like that. But after bishop takes pawn, he really has very little. Bishop g5, take. He's got a few white squares. So game continues. Eventually, they manage to get some counterplay. They get some pawns back, but ultimately, the black's connected passed pawn should be winning. But game continued and continued. Eventually, they get this endgame, which looks extremely difficult for black to win because black's king's so bad. But white decides they want the a pawn, and as a result, it's surprising, but the black king is starting to move forward a bit. And now, okay, king f2 is fine. h5. Now it would have been possible to go, for example, queen f3 and stop the king coming forward. Or if you're a bit more conservative, go queen d3 and stop the king coming forward. But instead, queen e4. Suddenly after king h3, white can and should be getting nervous. Queen here. Now, black is very close to getting through here. You have to stay on the g file, but and let's see, f3 is not winning. So maybe is there anything better than h4 as played? I might just check that on a computer because, so they say queen h4 check. No, queen g5. Really? So queen g5, the idea is to check on c5, and that would force the exchange of queens, I think. And if queen f3 check, you just play king takes pawn. That's brave, but it's probably working, because after king takes pawn, suddenly queen g3 happens and there are no more checks. But he played h4, and this gave the opportunity for an amazing defense, which I think Stephen Solomon would have found, but Froelich did not. Now, you've got to be very careful, because if you play something, well, king e1 was played in the game, and after queen g2, the queens come off, and this is an easy win, because you either allow the black king to get to g1 or to g3, and it's game over. So king e1 was definitely losing. But the pawn ending that white should have gone for is queen g1. Takes. Now, if you play f3, we can just go king f2. And actually, it'll be similar in the way the game goes as well. So then, if king takes pawn is a draw, because you haven't got time to go king g1 because of king g4. So the king has to defend the pawn. And now, it's a really curious ending. h3 check is losing, clearly, because of king f4. But a retreat of the king is fine. What's interesting is if black starts with king g4, so king g2, check. Now king here, king f4. Here, the obvious move is h3. And it leads to a position that is winning for black, but has been drawn more often than it's been won in practice, which is quite remarkable. In fact, David Smurden, the Australian Grandmaster, won a tournament in Holland because his Grandmaster opponent could not win this endgame. So it's quite remarkable that people just can't win this position. So here, after h3, well, king e4, you've got to step carefully. It's got to be king e1. I think. Oh no, sorry. It's got to be king f1. Sorry. And if king f4, king f2, and if king e3, king e1, that's absolutely normal. But black can play king e4, king f1, and now drop back and lose a tempo. King here, king e1, king here, king f1, and in a way, there are what you would call corresponding squares here, which is an old endgame theory that says that if one king's on one square, the other king has to be on the other square. And the problem for white is that when the black king is on e4, you need to be on f1, and when the black king is on f4, you need to be on f2. And unfortunately, in this position, you have to go to f1 or f2, otherwise the other king dives into g3. So king f1, king e4, and you've got nothing to do. King up, king f4, and king across. Unfortunately, the pawn will queen. So h3 is losing. But it's not losing if you just make a move. So, for example, king f1. And the reason is that when you play h3, you cannot play f2 here because of stalemate. And that pawn on h3 is a real handicap. So we just play like a normal pawn, and sorry, we play like a normal pawn ending, but unfortunately you're not winning it. Does king e1 draw as well? I don't think so. Oh, possibly it does. King here, pawn up. Now you can go h3 as well. And that's good timing. So those h pawns are seriously unlucky. You just you can't, if they get in the way with stalemate, and they also give white that extra tempo. So queen g1 would have drawn for Froelich, but Peter Froelich, I must admit, he's really not played that much in the last decade. He's become more interested in various other gaming activities, if you like to call it that, and I was a little bit surprised to see him coming back to a big tournament, but he certainly is an extremely capable player, but this is a horrible start, and well, maybe a few easy games will help him move up. So that's how one of the favourites, the 7th seed, went down, and he did certainly was in trouble the whole game, and to expect to play a queen ending perfectly, of course, is quite another question too. So I don't think that was an undeserved win for Aidan Brady at all. He's just 22. He's had a pretty decent year, coming second in the Darling Downs Open, for example. And I think equal first in the Leo Wilkinson tournament last year. So he's certainly coming along. And well, Peter Froelich was just not in good enough shape, and it was the tactics that really got him. And the other surprising result, was the draw by Stephen Solomon against Mars Chi. Now, Solomon played his normal Petrov defense. D4 is certainly one of the main lines, but here knight takes e5 is normal. Pawn takes is not supposed to give black any problems at all, and that's in fact how things transpired. Knight c5, knight e6, followed by c5. Absolutely fine for black. You could even say black's a fraction better. Bishop e3, at least d4's under control. And now the only thing black has to worry about is that that pawn on d5, which is a little bit hard to defend in some lines. So b6, bishop b7, rook e1 was a big surprise, but I think black decided if rook d1 it was going to be risky to take that pawn anyway. So for example, if rook d1, then queen c7, queen takes. Is that queen trapped is my question. Maybe not. Knight d4, you can run away. You can keep running. Oh, but b5 is going to win. And I can swap and play c4. swap on, let's say f3, and play c4. So that's good enough. So he played rook fe1 first, protecting the bishop on e2. Queen c7. This time queen takes pawn, knight a5 will trap the queen, I believe. So I think that's a dead queen. So still can't take that pawn, and black has time for rook d8. And eventually white decides, well, let's get out of the way. Now d4, there's some sort of pin on the queen on c7, is there? Probably, yes. So they're maneuvering. And knight g5, that's not a bad decision, because at least it gives white a chance to go f4 in some lines. I'm not sure about g6, because there's a few holes around here. But certainly black wanted to play f6 at some point. So bishop g7 getting ready for f6. f6 played anyway. And here queen d2 takes and queen takes. And now there was slight miscalculation by Solomon. Well, perhaps even going into this was a slight miscalculation. If black goes king h8, I think queen d7 solves all problems. But knight d4, queen c4, knight f5 was the idea, but I think he'd completely missed rook d8, a lovely move from Chi, and suddenly things aren't so easy for black. So queen f7 is necessary, take, and pawn takes, and unfortunately that protects the bishop on h4. And if you go b5, we've got plenty of squares to move the queen to. So takes, rook takes, and rook d1. That, again, makes it a little bit hard. You can't play rook d5 because of bishop c4. So g5, and because of the slightly weak king, this should be absolutely comfortable for white, despite the bishop pair. And that's a sensible maneuver. Bishop d5. Perhaps bishop c4 is fine here. We're trying to play knight against bishop, but white was content just to get opposite coloured bishops. And the game continued. And Solomon declined to draw around here, as he would do, but didn't really generate serious winning chances, though. To show how desperate he was to win, we got some position like this. And then he goes b5, c4, and now king d6 in order to stop c5. So he's hoping to go king c5, but even bishop c2 is fine, of course. I don't know if white was trying to win this position, but eventually they had to agree to draw. Solomon's losing too many pawns certainly didn't help his cause. So he's dropped a draw to a much lower rated player. That's the 8th seed Stephen Solomon. Solomon is in fact the player who has won more Gold Coast Opens than any other player. He's also been to 10 Olympiads and won the Australian Masters 7 times. He's really kept going. The guy is 58, and yet, for example, the Queensland Open, he won 4 times in a row from 2015 to 2018. That's just before the pandemic. So his age may be slowing the Ironman down, but certainly he can still play really well on occasion, and he's the sort of player that the top seeds just don't really want to play, because they will be up against someone who is absolutely capable of beating them on his day. He doesn't have those days so often, and like yesterday, he can drop half points to players that he shouldn't, but that's part of getting old. Okay, and now I'll just give you a quick view of Bobby Cheng's win against Andrei Bukharev. Bukharev is certainly he was a late entry from Sydney. He's not so young. Bobby Cheng, of course, board 3 in the Australian Olympic team behind Kubakarov and Anton Smirnov. Or Anton's board 1. He's still only 25. He was the youngest ever Australian Open champion. one of the youngest Australian champions, though narrowly beaten by John Paul Wallace and John Purdy back in the old days. And also World Under 12 champion, of course. So he's currently working in Sydney in a financial company, but he's certainly still playing pretty well. So we have a bishop b5, check knight d7 is the move of choice when you want it to be complicated. Takes a6, and here you should definitely take on d7. That tempo you get is important. Otherwise, you finish up in a strange sort of Sicilian where your bishop on e2 is not that well placed, your knight on f3 is not that well placed, and black can activate his pieces really well. In fact, c4 is the idea, and I was wondering if Cheng would go b5 takes d5 when he suddenly went d5 anyway. And that's a pretty amazing move. He just wants bishop c5 for free. I think taking with the c-pawn might be the lesser evil. It's still very, very active for black after bishop c5. Instead, he took this way, and that gives e4 as an additional option. And Bakrayev, I had this idea with queen g5 that he thought would create a bit of mayhem. But in fact, after bishop f2, he can't take because of knight e4 check. King moves, and you just castle. And there's, you could perhaps try taking on e5, but opening up against the king looks horrible. Knight c3, it covers knight e4, telling the queen to go away, and now the bishop goes back. And all of a sudden, there's this queen b6 idea that's going to be very nasty. So bishop d3, well, e4 is extremely tempting, but rook e8 just keeps it threatened. Queen c2, b5. That's okay. You can grab pawns if you want, but the big idea is to decoy the knight away from c3 or the bishop from d3 and then play e4. b3 holds it together. Queen b6, of course, is active. Now the white queen is tied down. a4, and that turns out to just lose. Takes, e4. If rook b1, you just take the bishop on d3. If rook b1 now, you've got at worst queen f2 check, and you're a piece up. And here you can't take because of checkmate on f2. And it's just a piece for nothing. So Bakrayev resigned. Very easy win for the New Zealand-born Cheng. And he'll be quite happy to have got a black out of the way. But Bakrayev at 47 is not quite the player he was. He was a very dangerous player for quite a while, but now he's playing a bit more for fun than really trying to find the best move every time. So it's very tough. There are a few older players in this field, but notably not Daryl Johansson, who really dislikes 2 rounds a day, and more so as he's got older. He's now over 60. No Gary Lane. It's another player who may well have come if it had been in a holiday period, but he has business to attend to in Sydney, and also quite soon he'll be heading over to Britain to play in the British Championship. Although he's Australian, he's eligible, I think, by birth. So Gary Lane will be playing something pretty strong fairly soon. The other players that are missing, well, Anton Smirnov seems to be totally tied up in his university study at Australian National University in Canberra. Also, we're missing Justin Tan, who's the other member of the Olympic team, but he is based in Europe, so he's presumably playing elsewhere. And we also had a late withdrawal, unfortunately, from Alex Wall, the 1992 Australian champion. But Wall, I believe, had some medical issues like Zarui, only different. So he's had to drop out at the last minute. And Cameron McGowan is another player who's got a problem because this is not holidays. The tournament period is not school holidays in New South Wales, and he discovered he had some exams to attend to, so he had to pull out late as well. So I'll show you one other game, which was Brodie McClymont, who had a proper battle against Sankirtan Badrinarayan from Sydney. From ACT. But once the theory ran out, Brodie knew what he was doing. So black is trying to play a Marshall Gambit. White plays h3 so that you haven't played c3, bishop b7, and d3. So if you want to play d5, you've got to do it under slightly less favourable circumstances. It is absolutely still possible to play d5 here. Knight takes on e5. I think knight d4 is a main line. But he returns to a main position. So if c3 were to tempo down on a normal line, though it's absolutely playable, as Peter Lecco said, the object of playing the Spanish nowadays with things like the Berlin around is to get a position like this after c3. Even if you're a tempo down, it's better than the alternative. But a3 is absolutely fine. And now knight c3, which is a system that Garry Kasparov used to use with some success. So black proceeds as if nothing's happening, but you have to be very careful you don't lose control over d5. I'll just double check. I believe this would have happened a little bit, or yeah, there's a few games with that, but white's score is fairly sensational, I must admit. Not that there are any particularly strong players on the black side. I don't think queen c7. Yeah, there's plenty of moves you can play that are not queen c7 that are a bit more useful. Sankirtan had the idea of playing c4 to shut the bishop out of the game. The problem is it's an obligation for you as well. White's not about to play d4. Mind you, the solution by Brodie McClymont with rook c1 is a strange one, because black doesn't really want to swap on d3. So rook c8 reinforcing it. But white's happy just to keep developing. Queen c5, and now knight e2. So that knight will go to the other flank. Remember, we will be able to go knight g3 if the bishop on e7 is not protected. Knight c6, and now a lovely knight g3. So if g5, well, apart from the fact we can probably sacrifice, we can at least go knight f5. And if you take the bishop, we take on h6 with the queen, and we checkmate you. So that's g5, knight here, takes, and that's is that it, or 98? Oh well, yeah, 98 hangs on. I feel like it should be mate. It will be mate soon enough, but we may have to do a little bit of bringing new pieces into the game. I think I'll give a few checks again. There's really no mate, eh? But rook e3 will do. I may have better, but that'll do. So g5's impossible. Knight h7 played. And yeah, really lovely and surprising move. Pawn takes on c4. Because, okay, if you take on h4, knight takes, and we get another knight into f5. Pawn takes, knight f5. Bishop takes, knight takes. That's at least slightly better for black in that the knight on h4 is not doing too much. But you've just got to worry about the attack, either knight h6 or reinforcing it with rook e3. And remembering, of course, that your d6 pawn's pretty weak too. So rook d8. Now the question is whether black can play d5 around here. You could stop it with rook d1 if you wanted, but rook e3 is just quicker. We're threatening rook g3. Now we're going to take that knight. So perhaps f6 is possible, but remember, I think after f6, white was getting. Hang on. e4 is hanging here. I was thinking of playing rook's d3. I could also play queen d3 if I wanted. It doesn't look bad. Queen d3 might allow knight a5. So I wonder how decisive this actually is. I feel like the c4 pawn is extremely weak. I just can't quite find a knockout blow with it. I wonder, is there a knockout blow, or we're just playing positionally here? b4. Hadn't seen that at all. Queen e2. Queen. Okay, so rook e1. There's nothing absolutely crushing. Well, it may. I mean, b3 takes. You could probably either take with the pawn or with the bishop check. Bishop check looks pretty good, but the king can hide on h7. So I'm not completely. What is the point of that? b4 to knock you away from the c4 pawn. You take. Oh, rook takes, threatening the bishop and threatening a discover check. Very nice. Okay, hadn't seen that at all, and that's game over. So instead, knight d4, and then McClimate's big idea: take, and you have to resign because if you play knight e6, we have Anastasia's mate. Knight check, king h7, queen h5, and Anastasia's mate is what really impressed me about Magnus Carlsen. There was a trivia contest in Reykjavik, which Team Magnus Carlsen and John Ludwig Hammer took part in, and there were all sorts of slightly obscure questions, but one of them was what sort of mate is this? And it was a rook on h5, I believe, rather than a knight. And Carlsen, as you could see from the results, answered most of the questions himself, and he said Anastasia's mate. And it was a sort of obscure thing that you learn from The Art of the Checkmate by Renaud and Kahn, a really excellent little book, which names all the checkmates. But in fact, I later discovered, or Carlsen told me, that he had in fact pulled off Anastasia's mate against Hammer in a World Junior tournament. So he knew of the mate, and still didn't quite explain how he knew the name of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could look it up. And so anyway, the round is starting. There is a 15-minute delay, but I'll be doing these roundups 4.5 hours into the round, so it may be there'll still be a game or two going. But anyway, my roundup for my round 2 roundup will be at 2:30 today, and then there'll be one at 8 o'clock tonight. So if you want to tune in, I'll be looking at some of the big games that were played in round 2. I'll show you the pairings while it's still. Hang on, if I refresh that, they should have the pairings. They do indeed. So we have Canberra's Fred Litchfield against top seed Timur Kubakarov, Bobby Cheng against sensational 14-year-old Sravan Renjith, one of the best juniors in the country. Michael Kethro from Canberra, very, very solid with white, up against third seed Zhao Zhongwan. Rishi Sardana against a mercurial Jean Nicauchi, incredibly inconsistent. More so than Solomon, can play really great chess on his day. So Sardana may not have played him before. That could be interesting. And then New South Wales champion, though only for another week or two, Jack Rogers, who's moved to Queensland. He is up against Brodie McClymont, and that could be interesting as well. Rogers with white, always very aggressive. And in fact, board 6, Jack Puccini with white as well. So hang on. All right. So yeah, he's also dangerous up against the Melbourne junior Jackie Lee. He'll have some advantage. He's probably played Lee. Lee at 16 is looking pretty good. Then further down, Dusan Stojic, the veteran from Queensland, up against Teos Datar, the 22-year-old from Melbourne. Aidan Brady, after his win, gets Mars Chi, so the two upset players get paired against each other. There weren't too many people on a half. And the other broadcast game, Solomon Froelich. Now, that is a vicious second-round pairing. It's almost baffling as to how it could even happen. Because Solomon's on a half and he floats down to the top person on 0. Wow, so 2 IMs playing on board 10 in round 2. That's rather amazing. Then Sydney veteran Gareth Charles up against Joshua Christensen, who's a 20-year-old also from Sydney. And then Lillian Liu, former Australian, or current Australian girls champion, I believe, up against Andre Bukreev, who we saw earlier. So join me at 2:30 and enjoy watching the games at the moment. So thanks very much, and I'll see you later. Bye.